So thank you everyone for joining. It's really my pleasure to once again, I think this is my 12th LabKey user conference, something like that. And it's always a pleasure to get feedback from you, to hear from you and to see who's joined and to give you an update on what LabKey has been doing on the SDMS side in 2024. So before I dive into the actual content, I wanted to touch on a little bit of terminology. Some product names we have changed, and some new products we have introduced. So first off, we have SDMS. You've heard this term quite a few times. Hopefully you've heard what it means. This is our scientific data management system. You probably know it as LabKey Server. That's what we've called it. This was our first product. For a long time, LabKey was a single product company, and LabKey Server made a lot of sense to describe that product. But lately, as we've expanded, and depending on how you count them, we have 15 different products that we produce, all of which could be potentially called a LabKey server in a sense. This term really doesn't describe what LabKey server is and what it does, hence the use of SDMS. So you will see this term more and more going forward, and you will see LabKey server used less and less. So obviously, this is our enterprise integration and analysis system. It is also the platform on which every product we develop rests. So importantly, every single product interacts with each other because of this platform. Next up, I'll introduce CDMS, our clinical data management system. So this is really the dedicated part of our system that focuses on clinical trials and observational studies. And really, you can think of this as a new product in a sense, in that we've always invested heavily in study and assay and sample manager and other components that make up our clinical data management features. But in this case, we're really focusing in on a new product that integrates the best of these pieces to give investigators what they need for their workflows, for their data integration, for sharing and analyzing data within clinical trials and observational studies. And I'll be talking a little bit more about what that means to you and how we're innovating there in a moment. And then another new product. So many of you might use LabKey or think of LabKey as your laboratory information management system. But we are launching a true labeled LIMS product that is really built to purpose to really address those laboratory efficiency needs that are traditionally associated with LIMS products out there in the marketplace. So we're kind of refocusing on, again, the workflows and the processing and registration, et cetera, important to those scenarios. So you can think of this as sample manager extended to include more automation and incorporation of business logic, workflows, et cetera. All right, so Michael referred to areas of investment or areas of innovation or themes. These are really the four areas, the four themes of our investment for SDMS. And these should also look very familiar. These tend to be the areas where we invest last year, the year before, and probably next year as well. So I will cover each of these in detail, but I wanted to kind of give a framework of, what are the areas, where do we think about, where do we invest to make your lives better? So first up, strong investments, large investments in security and compliance. We've really amped up the security on passwords and authentication. We have extended two-factor authentication such that administrators can now decide which users, which groups are subject to two-factor authentication. So if you wanted to require only your site admins or only editors plus site admins to be required to use two-factor authentication, you can do that now. So this feature will also make it easier to roll out two-factor authentication over time. So instead of a single switch that says all users must do this all at once, you can start with a smaller group and expand that over time. We are continuing to invest in strict content security policies to allow strict content security policies so that you can protect your deployments and that our LabKey cloud can protect your information and your users more effectively. So as of now, all of our products, there's no inline script anywhere, which means strict content security policies can be deployed, and this prevents cross-site scripting attacks and other types of attacks on your systems. We've also improved API keys. So we've introduced the ability for users to delete their own keys, and we've given them the information and given you the information they need to make good decisions there. So we're now tracking and showing the last used timestamp for every API key, and there's now an optional description as well. So that you can tag your API keys with their use and decide whether it might be time to retire some of these keys or not. At least you get the picture of what is each of these being used for. SAML authentication configuration, single sign-on protocol, SAML. This is can be one of the trickier integrations to configure. We've found this out through our services team working individually with different clients. And based on that feedback, we've made improvements, usability improvements to make it much easier to figure out what settings go into making your SAML configuration work. We've also made PHI and PII handling more consistent and more reliable, particularly in cases where corner cases where it was difficult for the system to figure out where are the identifiers, how do I log this information. The system is now much smarter about determining all the information that needs to be logged and whether it should allow a particular query or not. We've also, on the security side, introduced an additional layer of security over the file system. So this means any piece of code, no matter what that code is doing, it is simply not able to get to certain sensitive files. It can only retrieve the files that it should be retrieving given its context. So that, again, helps with potential vulnerabilities and other issues. And then finally, not so much a product feature, but more a process within LabKey. We have instituted automated systems that monitor OWASP CVE reports. So basically, potential vulnerabilities and dependencies that we use. And we've instituted a process to evaluate and respond rapidly to any of these. So literally every night, this process runs and we respond the next morning in an appropriate and appropriately quick process. So we always invest in integration. We know that's important to you. LabKey is not a standalone system. SDMS needs to reach out and work with other systems and other services within your infrastructure and more within the cloud. So one large area of investment has been integration with the Snowflake data cloud. So we now have, LabKey has built in bidirectional connections with Snowflake. So if your institution has standardized on Snowflake or is thinking about it, you now have a way to push LabKey data into Snowflake if it's, for instance, acting as your enterprise level data warehouse. And likewise, you can pull data from Snowflake into LabKey. So if certain data that you wish to integrate into LabKey happens to reside in Snowflake, we can pull that data into LabKey. As usual with external data sources, you can use that data dynamically in real time, querying it integrating it with applications, you can also synchronize that data into LabKey data structures via ETLs and other mechanisms. So we're excited about this addition and looking forward to seeing how you, our customers, end up using it. And then there were several other integrations that we worked on this year. One is really more of an ease of use. So the LabKey JDBC driver is now actually included inside of SDMS. So this provides an easy avenue for your users to get that driver if they need it. It's no longer a separate download or a separate distributable. We've also introduced support for Postgres 17. This came out less than 2 weeks ago, and our upcoming release 24.11 will include full support for this version. We've also added a couple more integrations with analytics tools. These are, as usual, tools that our customers have said they wish to use with LabKey. And so we've added those integrations and tested them. And then finally, support for the newest version of MySQL. So getting data into SDMS and sort of sharing that and securing it is important. But once that's done, analytics is super important to us and to you. So I've listed one example. I'm pretty excited about calculated fields. This is an addition. This will show up in 24.11. But it basically allows you to add new columns to any table definition. So that would be a list, a data set, sample type. You can add calculated fields to those tables, basically providing an expression over the columns in that table. Pretty much the full power of LabKey SQL is available to you. The operators and functions within LabKey SQL can be used in these expressions. And the result is a column that looks just like any other column, provides filtering and sorting, summary statistics, etc. But it's actually calculated on the fly based on the expression that you have provided. So this kind of functionality has been possible in the past. If you create a LabKey query and you specify keys in the right way and you join that in via customized view, etc., you would be able to get this sort of functionality in place. This makes it, this new capability, calculated fields, makes this much, much easier. So looking forward to seeing all the calculated fields that you come up with in your systems. So I give a simple example here. This is obviously a simple BMI calculation. I happen to have a data set with weight in kilograms and height in centimeters. And so, weight divided by height in meters squared gives that calculation. And there it is. And it's available as a standard column. So we always make a lot of investments in infrastructure. SDMS, as I said, is the platform on which all of our products run. And we made heavy investments there this year. So I just want to mention them. This will be a big part of Josh's presentation in just a moment. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but I just want to acknowledge that we made an investment upgrade from Tomcat 9 to Tomcat 10. It's normally not a big deal. In this case, it was a fairly big deal because basically there were breaking changes between these two versions, which meant everyone had to move to Tomcat 10 in the version of LabKey that we shipped. And then likewise, we switched all deployments, whether on-premise or in our cloud. All deployments are now using embedded Tomcat. Standalone Tomcat is no longer an option. Josh will talk about that in more detail. As always, we look to improve performance as our customers highlight queries that might be slower than they'd like. we optimize those. We look for ways to improve those and optimize those. One example is improving performance on large audit tables. And there are quite a few others. And then one area which is not really a new feature per se, but kind of a new approach, or at least a more aggressive approach to deprecating and removing old and underused features. So we every day use the information we get from usage statistics that you report from your servers. This is how you vote. We use that information to determine where to invest and where not to invest. So if we see that lots of people are using a new feature, we will invest more there. If we see that very few or no one is using a feature, we will most likely deprecate that and remove it. So keep that in mind. It's very important that your server reports usage statistics. Otherwise, you might find a feature has been deprecated or removed. But if this happens, inform your account manager. There are ways to at least temporarily re-enable features like this. But we are committed to removing more and more of these features because it's not worthwhile to you or to us for us to invest and maintain and improve and refactor features that aren't really being used. So I highlighted just a few of the key features, but there were many, many others. In fact, the way I counted it, several hundred improvements were funded and made within SDMS in the last year through a variety of different means. I always encourage you to upgrade to the latest version so you can take advantage of these and review the release notes. They do a very good job of highlighting each and every change, and there are a lot of good things buried in those release notes. So review them carefully, and if you skip a version, make sure you look at the release notes for each interleaving version along the way. And as Michael said, and hopefully I've conveyed, your feedback is really critical to our success. Please share your feedback with your account manager. What's working well, what's not working so well, we want to hear it all. As you know, you can file support tickets if something's not working the way you'd like. And also, report those usage statistics. I just said that on the previous slide. I'm saying it again, and that's on purpose. We really use that information every single day. So unlike your governments, LabKey has an election every single day. And we look at these statistics to determine where we're going to invest, what we're going to improve, and what we're not. And then finally, hot off the presses is the client survey. You'll be getting a link to that after this webinar. You can also go to labkey.org, and it's highlighted. The link to the survey is highlighted there. We really want to hear that feedback. I get a lot of requests for surveys. Sometimes I ignore them. This is one. We do it once a year, and this information helps guide everything we do in the following year. So please take a few minutes to fill out that survey. As far as where we're going, from an investment standpoint, many different areas, but here are a few I want to highlight. I've mentioned SDMS. What that will look like is basically taking the power of study and combining it with the ease of use of Sample Manager. So integrating these study concepts into the Sample Manager app. So participants, visits, participant groups, and then working on scalability and performance, and then improving the usability and listening to your requests and improving the system to really focus in on what investigators need, what they need in terms of data input, also in terms of analytics and visualizations, to really run clinical trials and observational studies in an efficient manner. We are also investigating heavily and investing in generative AI and large language models. LabKey, all of our LabKey products, you put a lot of data into them, and there are many opportunities for us to provide analytics on top of that, leveraging AI, so that you can extract interesting information out of that data. More investment in PHI handling. Again, better usability. In particular, we're looking to simplify the model. It works great, but it's a little complicated right now. So we want to make it simpler, more obvious, exactly what's happening. This is obviously very important that you understand what's happening compliance-wise in your system. So we want to make that easier to use. And then finally, Josh will talk about this. We're starting to work on a migration strategy for those who are using SQL Server currently as their primary database. Most of you are using Postgres, but there are a few deployments using SQL Server, and we're looking just to simplify the product and simplify the deployments, simplify the kind of maintenance and support of those systems by migrating those particular deployments to Postgres. And I think at this point, I will, unless there are some questions, let's see, do I see any questions?
So there is a question that was submitted asking about the LIMS product that you mentioned early.
Yep.
And the kind of licensing, or what edition of LabKey might that be part of? Specifically, is it part of the open source, or is that a separately licensed offering?
Yep. So first of all, the LIMS product is really a separate product. So it's not, for the most part, going to be included in SDMS. It's a standalone product. It will not be available open source. So similar to Sample Manager and some of our other newer products, these are commercial, not open source products. Okay, with that, I think I will introduce Josh Eccles, who will be talking about the next generation of LabKey and how we are planning to build it.